What's up guys, this is Valentina with Bigger Creations, and today I'm going to show you how I master my own songs. Like I said, today I'm finally going to show you how I master my own songs. I've been getting a lot of requests on this video, so I hope it's going to be helpful for you guys. My process for mastering a song is pretty simple. One thing I do want to preface this with is you have to have a good mix before you can get a good master. So your master is never going to fix your mix, ever. So don't worry about mastering until you've mastered the art of mixing. If you like these videos and you want to see more like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and make sure you've got notifications so that you never miss a beat. Also, if you ever have any questions or want to see more content, check me out on Instagram. So let's get to it.
It wasn't supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby. Told you I would be your ride or die. I guess you didn't care about my life.
There's obviously some issues where we need the whole song to just be louder. And that's one of the biggest pieces of mastering. Now, in mastering, you do have the ability to fix minor things in your mix, but if your mix is majorly flawed, your master is not going to fix it. So I can't stress this enough. Make sure you have a good balanced mix. Make sure the mix sounds like how you would want it to sound if it were mastered, if it were way louder than what it is right now. I would say that this mix is pretty good and we're ready to master. So the first thing that I do to my master is I add an NLS bus. And this plugin is from Waves. And the reason why I add this, and I actually add this to all of my tracks separately as well, is just to add a little bit of that analog tape saturation. It's one of those like subtleties, but it really just does something to the sound of your mix. I can't really explain it. It's just something that you have to listen to. So make sure you're listening on some nice headphones or on studio monitors so that you really understand what it's actually doing. But it's a really subtle thing and it makes a huge difference. So this is it without it.
How could I be a fool?
With it.
Blinding my eyes just like I do.
It's super subtle, but I love the quality of sound that it adds to it. It just makes it sound a little bit more analog and just a little bit more like what we're used to listening to when it comes to commercial tracks. So once I've added that, that's just kind of like to get started. I add an EQ, and something to keep in mind when you're mastering is that you don't do drastic changes. The drastic changes happen in the mixing phase, not in the mastering phase, with the exception of volume. So you'll notice this EQ is like barely anything is being done, but it's really just me listening to the song and deciding what frequencies I'm not getting quite as much as I want to. So in this case, I like adding around the 80 kilohertz range, just a dB, like not very much. And the purpose of this adjustment here is just to make that kick punch a little bit harder. So I like doing that adjustment there. The other adjustment that I've done is around the 1800 range. And I've just boosted it a little bit less than a dB. And I just like that because that's kind of where the vocals sit. So it's a good area to just add a little bit more of a kick so those vocals sit a little bit higher than everything else. So it's still the focus of the song. And then I like to add a little bit of high end, not very much, just about a dB around the 8,000 range. And that just adds a little bit more brightness and clarity to the mix. Again, these are very small changes. We're talking about at most 1 dB, but that's the whole beauty of mastering. You want to make these subtle changes so that when you go to boost the volume, everything's sounding exactly how you want it to sound. Okay, so I'm going to play it without it and with it.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love.
So if you can hear that, basically this is working really well where the kick is being a little bit more punchy, just how I want it. And then it's added a little bit of brightness and clarity to the overall mix, especially on the vocals. So you'll notice the vocals just start popping a little bit better once I've added the EQ. So once I've done that, I add another plugin from Waves. And again, I'll put a link to any plugins that I'm using in the description in case you want to check them out. This one is a J37 tape from Waves. And this, again, just adds a little bit of that analog saturation, a little bit of a tape sound. And I just love the quality of what it brings to the music. So I like adding that to my masters. So this is what it sounds like without it and with it.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby. Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting.
So hopefully you can hear that. Again, it's subtle, but once you kind of add the volume, you're going to hear it really well. Okay, the next thing I like to do here is add a multipressor, and these are the settings that I've done. Basically, I'm just compressing this part between the 5,000 to 10,000 hertz range. And that's the majority of what I've adjusted here. So I'm going to show you what it sounds like before and after.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby.
And part of why I've done it here is just because I'm very conscious that I've added these higher frequencies in a lot of my EQs. So I want to make sure that those are in check and compressed. And compressing them just makes them sound a little bit more solid and cohesive in the mix. So that's what I've done here with the multipressor. Really subtle. This right here, this next plugin, the limiter, this is where the magic happens. I'm going to turn it on and you guys are going to hear a huge difference in volume, and I'm going to explain how I got to this. So here it is without it.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this,
And with it.
telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby. Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone.
So a huge volume difference. The way that I get about this is, first, I like to set my look ahead and my release, so my attack and release, as quick as possible. Basically, you want it to affect it right away. And then what I do just to kind of make sure that I'm not going in the red or clipping is I set the output level to be negative 0.6 dB. And that just gives me some headroom in case anything's going to go over. And then what I do is, obviously, what I decided to land on is 9.1 dB in gain. But how I go about this is I actually push it, like I start playing it and then I push it as far as I can until I start hearing noise and distortion that I don't like. And then once I've gotten to that point where I'm hearing noises and things that I don't want to hear, I start bringing it back down so that it's kind of that sweet spot. So let's set this to 0.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby. Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story.
So you can hear, as soon as I pushed it all the way, you can really hear the distortion, and we really don't want that. We don't want to lose quality in the mix. We just want to add volume. So the sweet spot on this one I found was at 9.6. Again, this is all determined by how your mix is to begin with and how much headroom you had to start with in your mix. So in this case, I had about 9.6 dB that I could add there in volume. That's the biggest volume increase that I'm going to be adding in this mastering phase. Okay, so now that we've got that, we're just going to add some finishing touches to the master. I like to add a spreader, and this is just stock inside of Logic. And what you want to make sure you do when you're adding a spreader is that you're not spreading your lower frequencies, like the bass and the kick. You don't want those to be super wide. You want the higher frequencies to be in that stereo feel. So that's what I've done here. I've applied it just to the higher frequencies. The higher the frequency, the more it's spread out. So here's what it sounds like before.
Supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than this. Oh, I promise you, baby.
Okay, Here is kind of like a secret sauce. I'm so happy I found this plugin. This plugin is by Waves as well. Again, there'll be a link in the description. But this one is called Infected Mushroom Pusher. It sounds pretty questionable, but it's actually, I love this plugin because it just adds those finishing touches to your master. So basically, when you start with this, all the knobs are all the way down. So here you can change the amount of input that's coming in. Obviously, we've already set the limiter to do what it needs to do. So I rarely tweak this unless I see that it starts pumping in the red.
How could I be a fool? Blinding my eyes just like I do. How could I be a fool? Blinding my eyes just like I do.
The cool thing about the low end is you can actually pick the note that, or the frequency that you want to affect, and it's tied to a note, and that way it kind of boosts those lower frequencies.
How could I be a fool? Blinding my.
And then here I like to set it to limit rather than clip. So I like to set it to limit, and then I bump this up as far as sounds right. So basically, these are the settings that I decided to go with for this mix. And this is what it sounds like.
How could I be a fool? Blinding my eyes just like I do.
Okay, you guys, we're almost there. The last thing that I like to add here is more just for peace of mind and to just make sure that my song is not clipping. So I add another limiter, and this one is just stock inside of Logic. And what I've set the output level to is -0.1 dB. And this just guarantees that nothing is passing that, so that I'm not clipping and everything just sounds clean. It's just kind of my safety net, last thing to add on my master track.
See me while you're looking at her. How could I be a fool? Blinding my eyes just like I do. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Now I'm sitting here like this, telling everyone the story. How could you play a girl like this? Ain't nobody love you more than you, baby. Told you I would be your ride or die. I guess you didn't care.
So there you have it, guys. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully this makes it a little bit less mysterious for you on how it's done. Mastering doesn't matter if you don't have a good mix. So work hard on your mix, make sure that that's where it needs to be so that when you master, you get the most out of your song and people enjoy listening to your music. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you're subscribed and that you've got notifications on. As always, if you ever have any questions or want to see more content, check me out on Instagram.